Good afternoon and welcome to Take Care of Your Gums. We are here live for the Spanish Society of Periodontology. This space is dedicated to society in general, to all of you watching, and the idea is to raise awareness about gum health and basically oral health. What do we have to keep in mind? And above all, what we've learned in this second season of Take Care of Your Gums, the multitude of relationships that exist between the health of our gums and our health in general. Today's topic is very interesting. We're going to talk about sports as it relates to the health of our gums. Sports seasons are finishing up in many cases. They have already finished. We're gearing up for big sporting events like the UEFA Euro, and we thought it was a good moment to look at these questions above all, to prepare for next season, whether it's a professional sport or an amateur sport, because everything we will talk about today is very interesting. In a few minutes, I will say hello to the doctors Pere Buitrago and Reyes Jaramillo, but first, as always, we're going to take a short break to learn the perspective of the Take Care of Your Gums newsroom. We're going to speak with Paco Romero. Paco's experience is high level as head writer for Take Care of Your Gums, the magazine, as well as the website, and his point of view is always interesting, so we are all ears. Good afternoon, Paco, and welcome. Hello, good afternoon, Angel. Welcome, everybody. Sports-related greetings to everyone today. The topic being discussed today is something everyone deserves to hear about: physical activity and oral health. I have to admit that when I started researching this topic, I didn't know anything about this link. And it really caught my attention, this link between poor oral health and inferior performance in sports. So after talking to various experts and writing several reports, I was able to show or realize that there are physical and pathological factors that explain this relationship between illnesses like periodontitis and diminished performance in sports. This is fundamental for elite athletes, but also in the general population. People that play sports sporadically. Talking about elite athletes, it's very interesting because, as we reported on our website, that the oral health of many top athletes is not optimal. There are studies with Olympic athletes, with football players from top clubs, where their oral health is not well taken care of, and it's an especially interesting and relevant issue when it's shown that poor oral health and hygiene and the presence of illnesses like periodontitis, as we were saying before, can hinder performance. For these athletes, where 1/100th of a second can be the difference between success and failure, it calls your attention. But I think, looking at the general population, I would underline this message, the link between good oral health, the absence of illnesses like periodontitis, and a better quality of life. I think this is the fundamental message with regard to physical activity. We need to insist on this idea. If we take care of our mouths and the oral cavity, it can improve our physical activity and our performance. It's just one more reason to take part in physical activity and exercise regularly. I want to show my solidarity. I'm wearing sports clothes to do my part, and I encourage everyone to follow this example. And finally, I want to recommend an article that was published on our website. That's from issue 13 of Take Care of Your Gums magazine. We have it in PDF version on our website. And in this issue, there's a report about this topic, physical performance and activity and oral health. We highly recommend reading it, and we encourage everyone to live a healthy lifestyle that will help keep your mouth healthier and give you better overall health. So see you next time, and now I'm going to do some sport. Take care. We will keep an eye out. Cheers, Paco. We'll keep an eye on your fitness level. Above all those exercises, share them with us, and we will take note because good weather is coming so we can go outside and do some sport. Coming up next, we will speak with our specialists. They're waiting for us, but first, a short commercial break.
Cuando amanece y un nuevo día comienza, es momento de pasárselo bien, pensando en el presente y en el futuro, sin pausa, sin prisa. Cuidamos con una sonrisa. Mírate en el espejo. ¿Qué ves? Un mundo lleno de oportunidades. Dale la bienvenida. Cuídalo. Un pequeño gesto hoy puede definir el futuro. Una vida sana. Cuidamos el mañana. Día tras día, unidos con optimismo e ilusión a través de esos pequeños gestos que nos hacen mejores y nos llenan de felicidad. Cuidamos con complicidad. Es hora de irse. El mundo te espera, tanto por hacer y recordar. Grandes o pequeños, aprendiendo unos de otros. Juntos tomamos consciencia. Cuidamos bajo la experiencia. Y al anochecer, revive los mejores momentos. Las risas, las sorpresas, lo inesperado. Descubriendo detalles de inmenso significado. De forma plena, completa, de principio a fin. Cuidamos de ti. GUM, cuidando cada detalle.
In the next few minutes, we will be speaking with Dr. Pere Buitrago and Dr. Reyes Jaramillo. And just a reminder, as you see at the bottom of your screen, you can leave us your comments and you can do it on YouTube, and they will be shown in real time to our specialists. Let's begin the interview. Here we have our two healthcare professionals today, Dr. Pere Buitrago. Good afternoon, doctor, and welcome. Good afternoon. I'm a bit anxious here to try and provide a little help with regard to this exciting topic about the mouth and sports. No doubt it's going to be exciting, and we're going to learn a lot today. Dr. Pere Buitrago is the director of the master's program on periodontology, osseointegration, and periimplantology at the School of Dentistry at the Catholic University of Valencia. Also with us is Dr. Reyes Jaramillo. Good afternoon, Reyes, and welcome. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to participate with you in this exciting area. Thank you as well on behalf of the Foundation of the Spanish Society of Periodontology. Dr. Jaramillo is a professor of dentistry at the University of Seville. Welcome, doctor. Thank you. And now that I have you up on the screen, I'm going to begin with you. And I wanted to ask you about the relationship that exists between oral health and sports. What is this relationship, and what are we looking at as we begin this episode of Take Care of Your Gums? Well, we can say that today there is sufficient scientific evidence to determine the relationship between oral health and sports. Basically, when an athlete got injured or had a tendency to get injured or drop their performance, it went to the medical specialist of the team and the dentist to do a dental exam and see if the origin might be there. At the beginning, they didn't know if the relationship was a coincidence or a true cause. The relationship between the athlete and the dentist was based more on empirical knowledge of the athlete in question. And today, there is sufficient evidence to confirm the relationship between these two branches. So in the mouth, the two most important illnesses are cavities and periodontal disease. Both are infections and inflammation that affect the tissue locally in the mouth, teeth, gums, and the supporting bone, and that local infection inflammation can get into the blood flow and cause illnesses in other organs. And we've seen that periodontal disease is related to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, pregnancy issues, low birth weights, premature births, and it's also related to the muscular skeletal system, which we will talk about throughout the interview. So, to sum up this first question, we would say that an ideal level of oral health is essential for athletes and for any patient to prevent important illnesses and to contribute to the well-being of professional and amateur athletes. Dr. Witrago, how can oral health affect performance in sports, whether it's a professional athlete or amateur? Is there a direct relationship with regard to physical performance? Well, yes, there is. There's a clear and direct relationship that can be compared on two levels. One is intuitive, that everyone can understand regarding nutrition. There's something that will affect the performance of an athlete, but there's another part that has been verified as studies have been carried out in looking at why certain athletes were more predisposed to injuries than others. And so we have to understand that sports per se induces an increase in blood to the muscles and joints that allows for maximum performance and which leads to inflammation. This inflammation is what later allows the muscles to respond, which increases their capacity. What happens? As Dr. Jaramillo just explained, there are other situations in the body, like illnesses or other risk factors, like obesity, that increase secretion of what we call pro-inflammatories. To give an example, to see if we can make it understandable, it would be like the tinder. It would be like fuel for inflammation. So for an elite athlete who is always at the limit, these molecules are found in their blood flow. It's like sparks flying as a consequence, as a result of their intense training. And then they receive from the mouth, which is inflamed, or from obesity, this tinder or wood that's going to make this inflammation explode in an even bigger way. So it's been proven, and it was said by Paco at the beginning of the program, and even here in Spain, we have evidence that this situation can provoke an increase in injuries for elite athletes, and even a longer recovery time for these injuries. And watch out. This has been detected in elite athletes because they are subject to intense work, but even though we don't yet have studies that support this relationship for amateur athletes, we are all conscious that when we start getting good weather, as you just said, Angel, that we start doing sports or getting our beach bodies in shape, we're getting ready to put on bathing suits, this could mean overactivity as we try to do things that elite athletes do, but without the preparation that elite athletes have. And so we get sports-related injuries that unfortunately we've all had at some point. And maybe, because of all the time that we've been doing nothing this year, maybe it gets worse. I completely agree. This year, we're all on the starting line. Let's go. And we have to keep in mind, like when they say before you go out for a long drive, make sure your car is in good condition. If you're going to go out on a long trip, but you've only been driving to work, get your car ready. You're going to drive 600 kilometers, so if we're conscious of this mentality with a machine that you can replace, imagine what it should be like for our bodies, which we only have one of for our entire life. Preparation is fundamental at all levels. Reyes, in looking at the two-way street that we've been navigating during the second season of Take Care of Your Gums and the relationship between the health of our gums and general health, could we conclude in relation to what Dr. Witrago was talking about that athletes with poor oral health can get injured, are they also going to have more dental problems? Are they more likely to have cavities or periodontal disease? Yes. If we look at some studies on some football clubs and others, not just football, there happens to be a greater prevalence of cavities in athletes than the general population. But what is the reason? Regarding cavities, we know that the diets of athletes is high in carbohydrates. They tend to consume sports drinks, carbonated drinks, juice, shakes, but all of that with sugar, so that those drinks provide the energy that they need during their training as well as in competition. If we add to this carbohydrate-rich diet the stress that normally accompanies these types of professionals and the stress that is generated, it leads to decreased flow of saliva. So we have a sugary diet combined with a low amount of saliva, and so that is the ideal environment for the development of cavities and dental disease. And it's not just cavities that are more frequent in this sector of the population, but also periodontal disease. We've seen that this is also common in athletes, and so early detection is key for treatment. And as Pedro said before, periodontal disease causes systemic inflammation, which could cause problems related to overtraining. So when people play sports, blood flows to the muscles, and in the mouth, there's less flow of saliva and an increase in bacteria. And that can cause an increase in bleeding gums. And we have to keep in mind that gums that bleed are not healthy, both for athletes and the population in general. So it's important that when we see bleeding gums during participation in sports, we need to talk to a dentist and find out if it is the beginning of periodontal disease. I don't know if Dr. Buitrago would like to add anything to that. She explained it very clearly. The only thing I would add is that bleeding in the mouth is never physiological. It's a sign of alarm that we should not ignore, because oftentimes it happens spontaneously. We tend to not brush areas that bleed thinking that we are causing harm, and so we are ignoring the first sign that we should make a visit to the dentist. It goes away, and we think everything is fine. And we ask people around us, and yeah, don't worry about it. Yes, worry about it. If our eyes are bleeding, I'm sure that we'd go straight to the emergency room. But if our gums are bleeding, and unfortunately, statistically, it's very common, which is why we don't give it much importance, like Dr. Jaramillo said, it's fundamental. We can't ignore the signs. If we see any blood, we have to go to a specialist at the very least. You have to check it. Yes, you have to check it. Let me open up another area for debate with regards to sports and the topic of injuries. Obviously, when someone is moving and they make a certain amount of effort, they are more prevalent. When you stay at home and you don't move, it's more difficult. How can you avoid these injuries? Are they more frequent when we participate in sports? Well, despite the poor reputation of sports with respect to injuries, depending on the studies that you read, you would see that it's between second and fourth on the list. The most frequent situation are accidental falls and even fights and traffic accidents. So sports is between second and fourth. But evidently, as Angel just said, if you're not moving around, you won't have problems, immediate problems. In the long term, yes. This is an inherent risk in sports activities to that type of injury. We often relate it to contact sports like rugby and martial arts. However, to give an example, my son plays basketball and they don't wear mouth guards. But whenever we see an NBA game, you see one of the stars playing with a mouth guard. and we see that they are wearing it. The conclusion: I think that the best prevention is understanding that part of the basic equipment for protection in sports, above all in team sports, which is where we have contact, and I would even include racket sports, would be to wear a mouth guard. Like when people go roller skating, we buy them wrist guards, elbow pads, knee pads, helmets, but not a mouth guard. We need to understand that a mouth guard can even improve performance, which contrasts with the idea that it makes breathing more difficult, which isn't true. There's a saying that the mouth guard unleashes your potential. So within the equipment for our kids and for us, I think including a mouth guard would be a very good idea. Reyes, not all mouth guards are created equal. We have the NBA mouth guards and the ones that have questionable healthcare benefits. Yes, mouth guards should be fitted at a clinic. They should be customized with a special process, impressions. It should be made in the lab. It needs to be adjusted in the mouth. So we need to go to the dentist for this in order to protect us properly when playing sports. And something I'd like to add, if you have other activities in which you don't wear it and there are injuries, and you have a tooth fall out and the tooth falls out completely, to find the tooth and go as soon as possible to the dentist. The sooner it gets fixed, the better the prognosis. And the best way to transport the tooth is in milk. And if that's not available, in saline solution or in the patient's own saliva. So a reminder, if a tooth falls out, pick it up, and later on, if it can't be used because it's a fragment, the dentist will decide that. But if we take it, it's better to have all options available. Okay, so now we wrap up the section on dental injuries, and we will open another section which will be very interesting about something which is very popular in sports, which is sports drinks. What impact does consuming sports drinks have on our gums and on our teeth? Reyes? Well, like we said before, sports drinks are common for athletes who have a diet rich in carbohydrates and sugary drinks. The problem with these types of substances is that when the sugars are in the mouth, the bacteria that colonize our oral cavity, they metabolize the sugar and transform it into acid. Acids are bad for our teeth because they demineralize the tooth, the hard structure of the tooth. So if that happens, the enamel dissolves and that foments cavities. So what we're going to recommend is a varied diet that has carbohydrates but also protein and especially vitamins. It can provide energy without causing the damage inherent in consuming sugary drinks. And another thing that's very important is hydration. Hydration is extremely important throughout the day. Athletes have to drink water all day long and a lot more while participating in sports. Why? Because sports activates the nervous system and the muscles and the organs that work hard in sports, and it reduces the flow of saliva. And if there's less saliva and a lot of acid, it can produce more damage in the mouth. So it's important to drink water during the day and also while playing sports. And it's important that while playing sports, not to consume sugary drinks. Because if there's no saliva, and instead of drinking water, we are consuming sugary foods, that favors the appearance of cavities. What that leads to, Dr. Buitrago, is another problem, the dry mouth. Yes. Well, let's see. The dry mouth is a general reaction. Let's have a look. People say that sports is stressful. That's not true. Sports is not stressful. Sports helps overcome stress. What happens is the body receives signals in order to adapt, which is also known as stress. But what's the difference? The difference is the name, because the reality is the same. The problem is stress has been associated as a negative thing. In order to help us understand it, relating to sports or decision making, our bodies activate a system to respond mechanically. The muscles have to act, and the brain. So the blood leaves the digestive tract to help us give 100%, and that causes low flow of saliva, as Dr. Jaramillo said, and that is the feeling we have before going running, in a tense match, when we speak in public, the famous glass of water that's always right next to you. It's not because conference speakers are thirsty. We just drank some water. And we drink less so that we don't have to go to the bathroom. We drink it to moist our mouths. And as Dr. Reyes says, if we also associate that with energy drinks high in sugar, not just sugar, but also with an acidic pH, we are giving wings, and this is not a marketing ploy. We are giving cavities the perfect breeding ground. So as amateur athletes, what I recommend is special products that have two types of sugars, but burn quickly or moderately, and that can be consumed very slowly while participating in sports. Because the reality is, as Dr. Reyes said, it's about hydration before, during, and after. Hydration doesn't just affect the mouth, but it will also help prevent muscular injuries, because if the muscles aren't well hydrated, they become fragile, and as they contract, they can cramp up, which is typical with runners when we break into a sprint. So stress, which is fundamental and necessary in sports, is demanding on the body, and we have to supplement it with adequate hydration before, during, and after, and provide sugars to the muscles to improve their performance. Dr. Jaramillo, is there another way to look at this stress, which is the pressure in the jaw, when we are in intense competition? And if so, how can we avoid it? Well, yes. As we were saying, the stress of competition causes a habit called bruxism, which is the habit of clenching or grinding your teeth. Bruxism causes injuries in the mouth, which leads to erosion of the teeth, and that erosion can lead to higher sensitivity, small cracks, and even broken teeth, and even tooth loss. And all this caused by bruxism doesn't just cause damage in the mouth, but the tension of the articulation around the jaw can go further and cause tension in the head and neck. It can cause headaches and neck aches. And for athletes with bruxism, when there's a contraction in the head, neck, and shoulders, which is inherent in certain sports, like for example golf, what has to be done is it has to be treated as soon as possible. We can do it at the dentist with protective devices, which are personalized. You go in, you speak to the dentist, they take impressions, it gets sent to the lab, and then gets adjusted. And this can be complemented by physical therapy to relax the head, neck, and shoulders so that these areas don't affect the overall performance of the athlete. Dr. Huitrago, when we were preparing for this interview with you both, we read that certain types of tendinitis and muscle pain are directly related with dental infections. What's the science behind all of this? As always, certain research leads to eye-catching headlines that are immediately extrapolated to the general population. There are studies, but they are for elite athletes. Professional athletes, as we've said, train at a level that is just shy of the level of injury, which means this syndrome of overtraining mentioned by the doctor is about working the muscles to the limit to achieve better performance, but without going too far so as to overtrain or cause chronic exhaustion. Because let's not forget, life is the most demanding sport. So what happens if you have a situation where your body is secreting these pro-inflammatory proteins? You are feeding with an inflammatory stimulus due to a sudden contraction related to muscular tension, as the doctor said. It can cause injury. Of course, the injury brings about an immediate inflammatory response to cure it, but if these pro-inflammatory proteins stay in the blood, which we've seen, it's not just that they are more likely to suffer these tendon and muscle injuries, but recovery is also slower because the process of recovery is lengthened due to inflammation molecules coming from another part of the body. In this case, periodontal disease that goes untreated. And untreated, it needs to be made clear just with diabetes. If you're diabetic, but you have it under control, your risk is no greater than the general population. So like with so many things, prevention, prevention, prevention. One of the messages we've heard a lot these days surrounding the European Day of Periodontics, prevention is key, no doubt. And regarding prevention, when playing sports, Dr. Jaramillo, how often do you have to go to the dentist? The same as those who don't play sports, or should we take extra precaution? Well, today, more and more sports teams are including dentists among their employees. But as a general recommendation, the ideal thing would be for athletes to go to the dentist at a minimum when the season begins to diagnose, treat, and prevent any pathologies before beginning the season. The best thing is to combine this with a balanced diet, as we were saying, as well as good hydration, and doing that before the season would be sufficient, in 6 months or even a year. If the patient already has a diagnosis of periodontal disease, the schedule of visits is different. They have to be treated as a periodontal patient, and they need to have a checkup every 3, 4, or 6 months. Why this varied schedule? Because it depends on the stage of the illness. If it's in an initial stage with low risk, they can go every 6 months. But if the illness is advanced and there's more risk, they need to make visits every 3 or 4 months to prevent the advancement of the illness and to keep a healthy mouth. Since we're talking about prevention, the word hygiene, Pedro, covers a spectacular dimension. What advice regarding hygiene would be good to share with people who play sports? It's interesting because amateur athletes are accustomed to searching for the very best shoe, the sock that has the highest level of breathability in function of the outside temperature. Pronator or supinator? Surface area, distance, and weight. And then we ask, what toothbrush do you want? And like the commercial said, whatever. What do you mean, whatever? Let's see. Here we have two things, habits and instruments. Habits. We need a training program for our mouths that includes prevention. And here we have two clear strategies. To prevent cavities, every time we eat something sugary. To prevent periodontal disease, we need to brush once a day, but done well. Quality over quantity. And on the other hand, we need the correct means. A good toothbrush And here we have to say that electric toothbrushes have been shown to provide clear evidence that they are more effective. It doesn't mean that they are always more effective, but they are in daily life. The necessity to clean between the teeth with dental floss or dental tape or with interdental brushes in function of your dental health, and the association at certain times and with specific reasons of mouthwash. But be careful, mouthwash doesn't substitute brushing. It's a complement with clear criteria for use. So just as we have training schedules, after we train, we have to clean our mouth. In fact, if you search in Google, there's a coach from the German league who makes his players brush their teeth after every training session. And that's something that should be implemented at all levels. It should be basic in sports and amateur sports too. If the best athletes do it, we should do it. So that's something that can be copied, the good habits, the good stuff. Also the good stuff. We are wrapping things up, doctors, and I'd like to ask you for a final summary, some conclusions from your points of view. We've spoken from the beginning about the relationship between oral health and sports. In the opinion of Dr. Reyes Jaramillo, what are the main ideas that we should take into account? I think that first, there is already literature out there regarding the relationship between health and sports. And since this relationship is real, we have to have a balanced diet. We have to consume carbohydrates, but also protein, vitamins. We need to reduce the consumption of sugary drinks. We need to stay well hydrated, as Dr. Buitrago said before, during and after, to avoid all the problems that come with a reduction of saliva flow, which happens in sports. And we need to go to the dentist regularly to prevent illness and get early treatment when it's more effective. And we need to have good habits of hygiene to avoid the consequences that come with consumption of all these substances. Fantastic, Reyes. Pedro, what should we take away from this? Well, apart from the magnificent summary from Dr. Jaramillo, I would simply make a small reflection. We are coming to realize that even with specific sports, both performance and results depend on the general state of your body. The mouth is the door into our body. If in a Formula One car, we maintain the chassis, under the hood, the aerodynamics, the tires, it would be absurd not to make sure that the gas tank is clean, because that affects the rest. So in conclusion, the source of energy and the source of health is the mouth. If you want to improve your performance, or you want to maintain your performance because you are not an elite athlete, and you want to avoid injuries, adding to everything that Dr. Jaramillo said, you have to take care of your mouth because your muscle performance depends on it. I think that's a good conclusion. Absolutely. It's an excellent conclusion, and since I'm a novice with this and I'm still learning about it, it's providing another dimension to the mouth that I never imagined. I'm kind of in the same spot as our spectators. I hope you don't really realize it until you hear it, the number of things that are related to maintaining our oral health and our gum health. Pedro, Reyes, Pedro, Doctors Jaramillo and Buitrago, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. It's been a true pleasure to listen to you. Goodbye. Thank you. Until next time. Effectively, that's the way it is. It's extremely important. Health begins with the mouth. It could be a slogan that we should be using. I'd like to remind you that you have all the information on the website cuidatusencias.es. It's a website open 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's a website with first-rate content, with reliable information. There is no fake news. It's information related to our health, which is so delicate and which we've learned so much about this year during the pandemic. So for any questions related to oral health, a reminder, it's divided by sections with quality journalism. I don't need to sell it to you anymore. Go to Cuida tus encías and see for yourselves what we're talking about. I will see you next week for a new live show. We will once again have the best professionals, thanks to the foundation of the Spanish Society of Periodontology, and we will discuss another topic, as always, related to oral health. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.